Aang is the Avatar. He's the last Airbender. He's the boy the entire world has been waiting for. Every prophecy points to him. Every episode says his name in the title card. He is, by every obvious metric, the main character of Avatar, the last Airbender. So here's the thought that's going to bother you for the rest of this video. What if Aang is actually the least important character in his own show? Not the least likable, not the least powerful, the least times necessary times to the story's emotional engine. Stay with me, because once you see this, you can't watch the show the same way again. Let's start with the belief everyone walks in with. Aang is the protagonist. The story exists to follow his journey from a scared, guilty kid who ran away from his destiny to a fully realized avatar who saves the world. That's the poster. That's the marketing. That's what we're told for 61 episodes. But here's the problem. Go back and actually map out who changes times across this show, and something strange happens. Zuko starts as a desperate, self-hating prince obsessed with restoring his honor, and ends the series having rebuilt his entire moral identity from scratch. Katara starts as a girl drowning in grief and responsibility, and ends the series standing over the man who murdered her mother, choosing mercy on her own terms, not because the plot told her to. Toph starts as a caged, underestimated child, and ends the series as the person who invented an entire form of combat because nobody else could see her the way she saw herself. Even Sokka, the comic relief, goes from a boy desperate to be taken seriously to a strategist whose plans win actual battles. Now look at Aang. What does Aang actually resolve internally? Read that sentence again, because it matters. His central conflict, the thing the show hammers into us for 3 seasons, is this. He is a pacifist monk who must kill a man to save the world. That's the setup. That's the tension. That's supposed to be the emotional climax of the entire series. And how does the show resolve it? A giant lion turtle he's never met, that no one has ever mentioned, shows up in the finale and hands him a brand new power we've never seen and will never see again. Energy bending, a magical loophole that lets Aang spare Ozai's life without actually solving the philosophical problem the show spent 3 seasons building. Think about that for a second. The single defining internal conflict of the main character isn't resolved through growth. It's resolved through a deus ex machina wearing a shell. Compare that to Zuko. Zuko doesn't get a lion turtle. Zuko gets banished, betrayed, humiliated, and forced to sit with the consequences of his own choices for 3 straight seasons before he earns his redemption arc scene by scene. Compare that to Katara, who doesn't get a magical shortcut when she finally faces Yonra. She stands there shaking, weapon raised, and she has to actually decide in real time who she wants to be. No turtle, no easy out. Just her rage, and her own capacity for mercy. That's where things start to feel much darker than Aang is just a chill kid who doesn't like violence. Here's the detail almost nobody talks about. Aang is not just the character who avoids conflict. He's the character the Times narrative itself, Times protects from consequence. Every time the story backs him into a genuine moral corner, something external saves him from having to choose. The lion turtle saves him from killing Ozai. The whole last Airbender premise means the emotional stakes of his genocide are almost never actually processed on screen. They're referenced, mourned in the abstract, but rarely sat with the way Zuko sits with his scar or Katara sits with her mother's death. Let that sink in. The character who lost the most, an entire people, an entire culture, every person he ever loved before the age of 12, is the character the show lets grieve the least. And this is where the psychology gets interesting. There's a concept in narrative theory sometimes called the audience surrogate or the passive protagonist. It's a character built less to transform and more to be a stable center that other, more volatile characters orbit around. Think of it like a sun. A sun doesn't change. It just sits there, burning steadily, while planets, the ones with atmospheres, weather, tectonic activity, are the ones that actually evolve over time. Aang is the sun of this show. Everyone else is the planet doing the interesting geological work. Why would the writers do this on purpose? Because a story needs an emotional anchor, someone who represents the right values so that everyone else's darkness has something to be measured against. Aang's job isn't to change. His job is to stay recognizably good so Zuko's fall from grace and Katara's flirtation with vengeance and Azula's total psychological collapse all have a fixed point to be compared to. He's not the protagonist of a character study. He's the moral constant in other people's character studies. Read that again, because it reframes the entire show. Aang isn't the son the story revolves around emotionally. He's the ruler other characters get measured against. But here's what makes this genuinely sad instead of just a clever writing observation. Aang is a 12-year-old boy who woke up from an iceberg to discover his entire species was wiped out because of a war he was, in his own mind, partially responsible for having run away in the first place. That is one of the heaviest psychological burdens you could hand a child character in any piece of fiction. And the show barely lets him sit in it. He gets an episode in the Southern Air Temple where he processes it in real time, briefly, violently, in the Avatar state. And then the plot moves on. He becomes, functionally, the emotional support system for everyone else's arcs. He's the one who forgives Zuko before Zuko's earned it. He's the one who tries to talk Katara out of her rage before she's processed it herself. He's the one who has to be the bigger person, constantly, because the narrative has cast him as the moral fixed point rather than a person allowed to be a mess. That's not a character getting to heal. That's a character getting frozen a second time, just psychologically instead of literally. And here's the moment that really crystallizes it. In the finale, Aang doesn't defeat Ozai through a choice that reflects who he's become. He defeats him through a power that exists outside the entire established rules of the universe. Meanwhile, Zuko is fighting his own sister in one of the most personally, thematically loaded duels in the show. A fight that is actually about their entire relationship, their father, their mother, their whole childhoods colliding in real time. Katara is helping him, and the two of them win that fight through skill, timing, and character. So ask yourself honestly, which fight do fans actually talk about? Which fight do people rewatch, frame by frame, analyzing camera angles and music cues? It's Zuko and Azula. Almost nobody is out here dissecting the emotional subtext of the energy bending scene, because there isn't any. It's mechanically necessary, not emotionally earned. This is the part that changes how I see the entire show. Aang isn't unimportant because he's weak or unlikable. He's structurally unimportant because the show doesn't actually need him to change in order to complete its themes. The themes get completed through everyone circling him. Redemption gets explored through Zuko. Grief and vengeance get explored through Katara. Identity and self-worth get explored through Toph. Even legacy and moral compromise get explored through Iroh and Ozai and Azula. Aang's role in all of that is almost administrative. He's the plot device that keeps the group together and the moral center everyone else bounces off. And maybe that's the most human thing about this whole analysis. Because think about real families, real friend groups, real teams. There's often one person everyone treats as the main character, the one whose milestones get celebrated the loudest, whose feelings get protected the most carefully, whose bad days somehow still don't get processed as deeply as everyone else's. And it's not always because that person is more important. Sometimes it's because the group needs someone stable at the center, and stability gets mistaken for depth. Meanwhile, the people orbiting that person, the siblings, the friends, the exes, the quieter kid in the group, are the ones doing the actual difficult internal work of becoming someone different by the end of the story. Aang gets to stay Aang. Everyone around him has to become someone new. So here's the question I want you to sit with, and I actually want your honest answer in the comments, not a yes or no. In your own life, who has been the Aang of your story? The person everyone protected, centered, and built their arcs around, while quietly doing less of the changing themselves. And who have you had to become, Zuko style, scar and all, just to keep orbiting them?